Hi, I'm going to demonstrate a prototype program that is similar to the clock program that I'm asking you to write, and it will capture the time from the system. It will use a substring method to drill out the hour and minute components of the string that we capture from the system. It will also use methods that are very similar to the methods that I've asked you to write. The method calls will be structured in a way that's very, very similar to what I've asked you to do. I'll be demonstrating both void type methods and return type methods. I'll be demonstrating both value parameters and reference parameters. So once you've seen how this simplified version of your clock program works, I think you'll be able to figure out the details for what I'm asking you to do. So let me demonstrate very quickly here what this program looks like. Again, it's a prototype program. It's not designed to be fully functional, but it has some of the same core features that your program will have. I'm using a button, and more specifically a button click event method to drive the program. Okay, so I've asked you to use a timer so that the event method can execute repeatedly. I will, because I want to demonstrate how the program works, I want to have a little more manual control over things, so I'm going to use a button click event. But if I were to swap out the program code that's in the button click event method and put it in a timer tick event method, I would essentially have the same kind of program that I'm asking you to write. All right, so hopefully that's clear. Let me run the program just so you can see what it looks like from the user's perspective. If you look down at the system, it is currently 10:45, so the hour value is 10, the minute value is 45, and I'm going to be capturing the time from the system clock, and you see that somehow magically the hour of 10 and the minute of 45 appears in the two labels, and I'm hoping that the clock is going to switch here from 45 minutes to 46 minutes very quickly so that I can punch the button again, and you can see that it is in fact getting that data by reading the date time string from the clock. So as my luck would have it, there it is. It finally switched to 46, and if I click again, then it updates with 46. Okay, so I think that should be clear to you. Let me go ahead and stop the program from running. And before we look at the actual program code, let me flip over here to a Word document that I prepared. And so I'm describing the function through a structure chart, much like I did in the example that I provided in the clock starter kit. So you see the driver method for the entire process is a button click event method, and I want to point out that, and we'll see this when we look at the actual program code, in that button click event method there are two string variables, two local string variables that I've declared. I've named them HR as in hour and min as in minutes, and I'm going to be passing these local variables. The values that are contained in these local variables are going to be used throughout the program here. I will be using them as arguments. I'll be using them as arguments when I make a call to my get time date method. Okay, so let's follow that. When the button is clicked, again, two local variables are created, and then there's a call to a method called getTimeDate. And when that method is called, we'll look at the next rectangle down. So this represents the first call here. It's calling a void type method. So this is a method that's going to perform a task and then be done. And when that method gets called, it will receive two values by reference. So what does that mean? That means that when this method gets called, the memory address of hour is going to be passed to a reference parameter p hour, and the memory address of min is going to be passed to a reference parameter p min. That is to say that hour, the local variable in the button click event method, will have the same memory address as ph hour in the private method get time date, and the local variable min will have the same memory address as the reference parameter again in the private method get time date. So we've got a local variable here with the same memory address as a reference parameter here. We have a local variable here with the same memory address as a reference parameter here. And the result of that is going to be that if I change within this method, I have access to these parameters, and if I should change the parameter value of either phr or pmin within this method, it will have an effect on the value stored in the local variable hr and the value stored in the local variable min. Again, because the reference parameters and the local variables, which are used as arguments, the reference parameters and the variables have the same memory address. So what happens when the button click event calls get time date? Well, the first thing that happens is the system is queried and I get the date time. Okay, so I'm showing you pseudocode here. And then the next thing that happens is there is a call to yet another private method. So this method is going to in turn call another method down here. And when it does, it's going to take whatever the date time string is that it got from the system, and it's going to pass it as it's going to use it. This method is going to use it as a argument in the method call, and it's going to pass a copy of that date time string to this value parameter. Okay, so it's a copy of it. It's not the memory address of DT, it's a copy of the data that gets passed. So we looked at that string, and if you recall, it's in a very specific format that consists of, I think, 19 to 21 characters, depending upon the time and the month and so forth that it gets from the system. So we saw an example of that last time, and that string is going to be passed down here. Now this guy's job, this method that has been called, has a very specific task to perform, and the task it needs to perform is to drill into that string and get the hour component out of it and return that hour component back to get time date. So you'll notice that the method that get time date calls, yank hour, is a return type method. It's going to perform a task with a copy of the date time string, and it's going to return a single value, that single value being a string that represents the hour component of the string that was passed by value to the parameter. So I'll drill out the hour and return it. Now, when it is returned, this is the key thing, it's going to be returned by way of an assignment statement, and the target of that assignment statement is going to be pH hour. What is pH hour? pH hour is a reference parameter. It's going to change the stored value in that reference parameter. Now, since that's a reference parameter, it has the same memory address as the corresponding argument, which is the local variable HR. That is to say, when this method drills out the hour component of the overall datetime string and returns it, it will, in essence, change the value in HR. As soon as we've yanked out the datetime, the hour from the datetime string, then the getDateTime method will immediately call the second method that's going to do the same thing, except it's going to drill out the minute part of the datetime string. Again, a return type method. Again, the parameter it receives is a value parameter. Okay, so a copy of that original datetime string is going to be sent. It's going to drill out the minute part of the string, and then when it returns the value through this assignment statement, it's going to assign to pmin, this second reference parameter. And when it assigns to pmin and changes the value in pmin as a result of that assignment, since pmin and min share the same memory location, it has just changed the value in this local variable. Alright, so real quickly, the button click event calls getTimeDate, yanks the entire datetime string off the system. That datetime string gets passed by value to a return type method. The return type method returns the hour component of the overall string and assigns it to a reference parameter which populates this local variable. As soon as that's done, the method turns right around and calls another method, a return type method, which does essentially the same thing. It takes a copy of the datetime string from the system, it drills out the minute component of it and returns it to the other reference parameter, which has the effect of changing the value in the local variable min. So once these two method calls are complete, these local variables have been changed. And once these method calls have been made, then getTimeDate is done. Control passes back to the button click event, where the button click event calls one more method, a void type method. It's going to perform a task and then be done. It's going to call a void type method called displayTime, and it's going to pass the value of local variable HR by value to a value parameter PHR. It's going to pass whatever's in min to a copy of it to a value parameter called pmin, and the copy of hour and the copy of pmin are going to be pushed out to labels on the form, and that's when the user sees the hour in one label and sees the minute in the other label. And as soon as that's done, the method's done. Okay, now the only thing that's really different here is that I'm using a button click event. So once that button click event method has called up this method, it's done. Program, is going to sit there idle. In your case, your button click event is going to be a timer tick event, and it's going to turn right around and go through that same sequence of method calls again and again and again and again, okay, and just go on indefinitely. And from the user's perspective, they see a continual refreshing of the time on the Windows form. All right, so let's take a look at the actual code here, and I'm going to go back to Visual Studio, take a look at the code in the button click event first. So what do we have? Well, I told you we had two local variables, HR and min. There they are. Now, because these variables are going to be passed by reference to parameters in the getDateTime method, they have to be initialized. Okay, so one of the requirements of working with reference parameters is the arguments have to have a value before they can be passed by reference. So what do? Well, it's real simple. I just assign them something benign like an empty string. Now they've got a value. Now I can use them. So the button click event declares the local variable, uses them as arguments in making a call to a void type method. So I can see that that's a void type method because it's called up just by invoking the method name. And so I would anticipate then control passing to get date time, and whatever's in the memory location referenced by local variable hour is that address is going to be sent over here, and the address of min is going to be sent over here. Now if I change p hour or p min within the get date time method, it's going to have the effect of also changing the value in HR and min in the button click event. So hopefully that's clear to you now. And so when get date time, this private method get date time gets called up, first thing it's going to do is yank the date time string off of the system and store it in a string variable DT. Then it's going to pass DT by value to a return type method called yank hour. I know it's a return type method because the method's being called by way of an assignment statement. And when this method concludes, yank hour is going to send back one value, and that value is going to be assigned to PHR, which is my reference parameter, which is the same memory location as HR. So let's follow that call to yank hour. When yank hour gets called up, there's a in the method header you'll see that it gets a copy of the date time string, and then a local variable called cur hour is created. And because the hour sometimes during the day consists of one character and other times consists of two characters, then depending upon the time of day, I'll either want to return a 2-character substring or a 1-character substring. And that's what this if-else logic is all about. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of substring in this video. I'm going to cover that in lecture today. But understand this much, that there's two possible ways that that substring that represents the hour can be returned. It can be returned at certain times of the day as 1 character and other times as 2 characters, and that's what that decision logic is going to allow me to accomplish. Either send back 1 or 2 characters, drill out 1 or 2 characters. Okay, and so eventually then this return type method will return cur hour. And you'll notice the way I did this too. I use one return statement, okay, and that's the way I want you to structure your return type methods. Declare whatever variables you need, assign to those variables conditionally, and then have one return statement at the end of the method where you return whatever value happens to be in the variable that's capturing the values. So I have one return statement. When that return statement is encountered, the method terminates, control passes back to here, and that return value gets put in p hour, which means it gets put in the same memory location as hour in the button click event. That method call is complete. Then the second method call occurs, and it's essentially the same thing. It's calling up a method that has a slightly different task, that being to drill out the minute component of what's in the datetime string. So I pass the datetime string again by value, and this time, because the minute component is always going to consist of 2 characters, then I don't have to make any decision, and it's a much simpler method to write. But I drill out the minute, the characters that make up the minute in the string, and return them. And they, again, are returned to reference parameters when this assignment statement concludes here. And that reference parameter is really the same memory address as local variable min in the button click event. And that's it for get time date. Whenever it has made those 2 method calls, then control will eventually pass back to where it was called. And it was called in the button click event right here, which means that my next line to execute is this one. Now, when I get to this point, the local variables hour and min have been populated with substrings from the datetime string, so I'm ready to display them. It's going to call up a void type method. You can see from the way the method call is written, it just invokes the method by name. It calls up display time. It passes the local variable hour from the button click event, HR, passes it by value, and it passes the local variable min by values, passing copies, not passing memory addresses, just passing copies, passes those to display time, and display time simply takes whatever those parameter values are and assigns them to the labels, and that's how you see, if I were to do it right now, 11 as the hour value and 03 is the minute value. And when that method is finished, control passes back to the statement beyond where it was called, so control passes back to the button click event, and we are at the end of the program, and it has pushed out the hour component and the minute component to the form. Alright, so again, we'll run this thing, and it is 1104, click 1104. Now let's take a look at the code here one last time, and I'm going to turn on the debugger. So for the get date time method, I'm going to click here, and I think the debugger will show me what I want to see. What I hope to do, I'm going to try to keep the breakpoints at a minimum so it's not so confusing. I've got a breakpoint set at the end of this method right here, which means that when it hits that breakpoint, it will have already yanked out the hour component and stored it. It will have already yanked out the minute component and stored it. Alright, so with that breakpoint in place, let's run it and see what it looks like. Hopefully this works the way I think it will. So when I run it, click, it will stop right here at this breakpoint, and when I mouse over hour, you see it says 11. When I mouse over min, it says 05. Now here's what I hope the debugger will show me, is that hour up here. It will not show me that. Too bad. Okay, so it only shows me the variables in the active method. I was in hopes that it would, if I moused over here, it would show me an 11 here as well, but the debugger's only showing me, allowing me to look inside of the variables in the active method. But you can play around with the debugger, and that's the way you set it up. So if I want to resume, I click. That should get me back to the form. I see the output, and once I close this thing up, after I'm done using the debugger, it'll be simply go out to this outer band where you clicked initially to set the breakpoint, and click on the breakpoint, and it'll turn it off. You're going to find that using the debugger is essential for some of the programs that we write in this class. Alright, I think that is everything I wanted to tell you, so hopefully this is going to be helpful. I'll be interested in your feedback, and I'll be seeing you here shortly in class.